With us now, the host of the Just Listen to Yourself podcast, Kira Davis, and independent journalist Brittany Hopper. Kira, I know you have a thing or two to say about the work of Mr. Tapper and also the decline of President Biden.
Oh, yeah, it was really rich to hear Tapper say, wow, the White House was just lying to everybody. They lied to the press. They lied to even his cabinet. They lied even to them. Oh, gee whiz, I wonder if there were only some kind of job that you could get where you are tasked with investigating things to find out the true story about what's going on behind the scene. I don't know if Jake knew anybody like that, but perhaps he might have wanted to look at a journalist to find out what was going on. I'm running out of words to describe this. I'm absolutely astonished at how stupid he thinks we are. I knew that Joe Biden was declining, and I'm a housewife. I live in Orange County, you know what I mean? I didn't have to really do a lot of research to find out what Joe Biden's mental capacity was. Jake Tapper sat across from him. All these people sat across from him. Yeah. Not only that, they all live and work on the Hill. What happens at 3 p.m. on the Hill? You go out to the bars, you're with the staffers, you're with the assistants, and they talk.
Talking about
Everybody knew this is a lie.
And Brittany, it always struck me, I want to cue up the video we can, if we can, from last June when President Biden was at that fundraiser. It was the George Clooney, Julia Roberts hosted fundraiser, if we have it there. And President Obama came onto stage, as you see right there, sort of took Biden by the hand, sort of just above the hand, really the wrist, and then a hand on his shoulder, and sort of walked him off the stage. I've always thought, Brittany, that that was the signal the Democratic Party was waiting for. They would not act until President Obama gave them, if you like, the bat signal. Okay, it's go time. We need to move this guy on.
Exactly, and I almost thought that it was leaning more toward a bit of elder abuse here. I mean, the more and more we saw how he was being treated, the more and more I started to actually feel sorry for him. But I want to raise a good point. What else were they lying about? What else are they going to lie about in the near future or in the future of the next elections? I mean, these are questions that we need to be asking, and we should be demanding answers at this point. The American people should be really angry about this. They were lied to. We were lied to. What else are they lying about? So this is sad. This is sad.
Yeah. It is. And then you get Chuck Schumer going on CNN today, and credit to Casey Hunt, who is no relation, by the way, asking the question about what he knew and when he knew it. And here's the answer she got.
You were in there. You saw him up close and personal. Did you really not have any idea that he was not fit to serve a second term?
Casey, we're looking forward. We have the largest Medicaid cut in front of us. We have the whole federal government at risk.
You're facing all of this because you lost a presidential election. And is that not Joe Biden's responsibility for deciding to run again?
We're looking forward.
That's it?
That's it.
Kira, that's it. To Brittany's point, Chuck Schumer may not have been lying there, but he certainly doesn't want to tell the truth.
Okay, well, also, Casey, you know, she wasn't telling the truth either. Excuse me, but I'm not really into this righteous indignation that the left-wing media has all of a sudden. Like, she's talking to Chuck Schumer like, oh, you're the liar. No, you guys have been conspiring for 4 years. You're all the liars. You called us the Nazis for pointing out that this guy was not well. We knew from the start he ran an entire campaign from the basement. We knew from the start. And then we knew when he fell up the stairs. And then we knew when he wandered off on D-Day. And then we knew when Obama had to guide him off the stage. We've known this whole time. Casey's known this whole time. Jake Tapper knew this whole time. That's why Chuck Schumer is indignant. Frankly, I'm on Chuck's side on this one. Yep. He should be indignant. She played along. She played the game. She knew what was up, and she's still acting. She's throwing him under the bus, acting like she didn't know. They all did. They are all culpable.
Brittany, a dereliction of duty on the part of journalists, some journalists, to an extent, certainly, but a dereliction of duty on behalf of Democrats who did know. Can they win back the trust of the American people?
Oh, well, and look, I mean, as you know, Jonathan, I was a TV journalist for CBS News in Los Angeles for 15 years. So I was with mainstream media and their little puppet and had to keep to the script. So I know exactly what Casey's doing. I do have to give her a little bit of credit here because she did push back somewhat for CNN. For CNN. But as far as the trust goes with the Democratic Party and, journalists, it goes hand in hand. No, I think more and more Americans are losing trust. It's coincide together. More Americans are losing trust with the Democratic Party and the journalists, but yet they're on the same team. And I should say left-wing journalists, not journalists over at Fox News.
Yeah, Brittany Hopper, great to have you here. Kira Davis, thank you so much for being here.
Another new book about former President Joe Biden says the former president didn't recognize his longtime friend and movie star George Clooney at the June 2024 fundraiser. It also says aides discussed him using a wheelchair if he were re-elected. Quote, Biden's physical deterioration, most apparent in his halting walk, had become so severe that there were internal discussions about putting the president in a wheelchair, but they couldn't do so until after the election. So let's bring in Fox News contributor Guy Benson. Hey, Guy.
Hey, Ainsley.
Good morning. Doesn't this reveal the White House's determination to lie, to conceal, to cover this up?
Well, sure. I mean, that's not a huge surprise. We've known this for a long time. What's getting me and really frustrating me, Ainsley, in a lot of the coverage, not here, but many other places, is this whole new level of gaslighting, right? The old lies have expired, so we're on to new lies where virtually everyone in the media and everyone in the Democratic Party gets to turn around and say, my goodness, heavens to Betsy, clutching their pearls. We were duped. We were lied to by this small group of people with special access, and they told us he was fine, and that wasn't true, and shame on them. And therefore, they cleanse themselves of responsibility and absolve themselves for everything that they did in support of the lie that was clearly a lie at the time. Like, you didn't need access to the Oval Office to understand there was a problem. You needed access to a television screen or a phone with the internet to watch videos of the president doing things like speaking and walking, right? This was not a carefully guarded secret. It was in the open. Many of us used our powers of observation to call it out at the time. We were called the crazy ones and the liars and the merchants of misinformation, the cheap fakers and all of that. And now we have, after the fact, these books coming out and people using those as excuses or even like venues for them to say, oh, yes, actually, we don't bear responsibility. That's like 4 people over at the White House, and they're all dispensable now. Shame on them, not on us. Let's move on. They should not get away with that.
And then to not even recognize his friend for 20 years who threw the fundraiser for him, George Clooney. An aide says in the book, quote, you know George Clooney. And then he had to be reminded, oh, yes. All right, let's move on to this next topic. The House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, is responding to what David Hogg is the vice chair of the DNC. They are trying to oust him. And it turns out the DNC will vote later this year on whether to remove him. And then the House Minority Leader was defending the Democrats. So let me read a quote from what David Hogg said first. He said, today the DNC took its first steps to remove me from my position as vice chair at large. While this vote was based on how the DNC conducted its officers' elections, which I had nothing to do with, it is also impossible to ignore the broader context of my work to reform the party, which loomed large over this vote. Our country's in crisis and too many leaders in the Democratic Party are asleep at the wheel. Then here's Hakeem Jeffries.
I think what I'm doing that's different from before is I'm challenging the status quo in a direct way and head on. And that really scares people. But frankly, I think right now, nobody should be comfortable when our country is in a moment of crisis. And I think that there is far too much comfortability across the board. And we need to make sure that we are electing the best people possible in our own party.
The vice chair of the DNC, David Hogg, he said today, quote, too many leaders in the Democratic Party are asleep at the wheel. You're obviously a leader in the Democratic Party.
Did he mention me by name?
He did not, but you are a leader.
Okay.
Are Democrats asleep at the wheel? Does he have a point, and should he stay in his role?
I think I've been very clear about my perspective on David Hogg, and I'm going to defend every single member of the United States House of Representatives in the Democratic caucus.
Guy, your response.
I mean, that's a punt from Jeffries. I do have to say, as a non-fan of David Hogg, which is probably not a shock to many people, it is a bit delicious that he might lose his post because of a DEI provision within the Democratic Party, and he's not diverse enough, and they didn't do their procedures properly under that rubric, so they might have to do a re-election. I understand why he's upset about that. It does seem like the knives are out for him for other reasons. But I'm just sitting here wondering, Ainsley, are the Democrats about to cancel another one of their elections? They did one last year, right? The presidential primary. They threw millions of votes in the garbage because the lie we were just talking about the incumbent, all fell apart on the debate stage. All right, never mind. The primary's gone. Are they now going to undo and void and nullify their leadership election at the DNC as well? I mean, this is wild to see from the party of democracy.
Yeah, they don't let the people talk. They just decide who's going to be in positions. Thank you so much, Guy. Great to see you.
There's a new talking point emerging from the Democrats, who are looking to get away from the barrage of brutal Biden decline headlines. The bat signal going out for the word forward.
We're not looking backward, we're looking forward.
We're just looking forward. We're looking forward. We're looking forward.
I'm interested in going forward.
That's backwards, not forward.
That's very backward looking. I don't really want to review all of it because it's past history.
Not so fast. It's hard to escape your past, especially when there's a new book on the cover and it's of Joe Biden's decline, and there's a new one every week. Now we're learning how Team Biden brought in Steven Spielberg to use his Hollywood magic and help coach the former president for the State of the Union and that ill-fated debate. Now Democratic 2028 hopefuls are being forced to address the revelations. Here's Mayor Pete.
Would the party have been better off if he had just not run for re-election?
Maybe. And, you know, right now, with the benefit of hindsight, I think most people would agree that that's the case. We're also not in a position to wallow in hindsight. We've got to get ready for some fundamental tests of the future of this country and this party, some of which are going on this very year, many of which will come next year.
But, Greg, it's not like Mayor Pete was a governor. He was in the cabinet. And did he not even think it was strange that
and he should stay in the cabinet where he belongs?
Yeah.
This is not actually about the Democrats. This is about the media. They are the rats in this story. They're like a member of the gang. In this case, it was the gang of the White House, the Democrat Party, and the media. They're the member of the gang that is now narking on everybody else so they can get prosecutorial immunity, so they don't go to jail. But the problem is, in this case, they're just trying to save their jobs. These books are coming out to protect them so they can start talking about, oh, listen to these shocking revelations. Biden would forget people's names. Dude, this is not shocking to us. We were talking about this, but they want you to buy into this is shocking, so you think that it was shocking to them. Like, yeah, can you believe this stuff? No. We saw it, and so did you. You're lying. You're putting these books out to protect your hide. What did they lead with? The wheelchair story. That was supposed to be the big story. And why did they choose that as the big story? Because it was about the physical issue and not the mental issue. Mm-hmm. But we don't care if Joe Biden's in a wheelchair.
Right.
We don't care about that. That's not going to affect how he leads a country. The mental incapacity, the 25th Amendment stuff, that's what we cared about. That's what the media is worried about, you finding out that they covered for that. The big question is, of course, if we are all on the same page about Joe's cognition, what does that say about his executive order since, I don't know, you want to start with I don't know what year you should start, but all the pardons should be negated. They should all be taken away. But this explains why the media did the expose now and not then, because they wanted this stuff to happen. It wasn't about Joe. It was about the whole Democratic piece that they were protecting. And now they could come out and go, hey, it's not us, it's them. They're discussing. This is why the media is dead. DOA, it's over.
Jesse, where does the 5 go to get its apology?
We don't expect an apology. A lot of people don't know this. Greg is in a wheelchair. Have you ever seen him stand up? No.
Yes, they are.
We put him in a wheelchair.
I'm standing right now.
Yeah, he's standing right now. Exactly. All right. So, what's the Democrats' message, Dana? Is it a Maryland dad? Is it eggs? What is it? No one knows. No one cares. The other thing is, why are we paying consultants to tell them to say stuff still after all these years? You're paying a guy $1 million to say we're looking forward? What was this guy doing? Yep, you can't change the past, no. Looking forward, here's your invoice. Good luck with that. The media is not even buying it. This guy tried it on CNN. They were like, oh, no, well, you got to look backwards because no one's going to trust you guys ever again. And this is about trust. How do they regain their trust back? Well, if you say you didn't notice anything, you're a liar. If you say you noticed something about Joe but didn't do anything, you're a coward. If you admit kind of that you knew he was shot, but you didn't say anything because you wanted to beat Trump so badly, then you're just a conniving, manipulative, power-hungry, sketchy politician. So wherever they go, they're toast. This is like January 6th with Republicans. They were asked for 4 years about that day. Was the election stolen? Was January 6th horrible? And they all individually had to come up with the right answer. Some say the FBI set it up. Some say it was a horrible day. Trump said it was the most beautiful day of the year. But they were all forced to come to terms with it. And that's what every Democrat needs to do. They need to be asked about Biden's health, and they need to be on record on it. That's how you gain trust back.
But what about the media? You're leaving out the...
You took care of the media. I'm taking care of the Democrats.
Well, I want to ask Kennedy about the Hollywood, because at this point, George Clooney is like, well, he doesn't even recognize me, so I'm not coming in to help.
Yeah.
And now they have to hire Steven Spielberg?
So Steven Spielberg took over for the movie AI from Stanley Kubrick, who passed away, and he had to finish the film. So I think someone in the Biden administration or in his inner circle was so dumb, they saw AI and thought, well, let's just do that with Joe. We'll have Steven Spielberg manage the whole thing and maybe get ourselves a handsome animatron like Jude Law, and he could play the part of the president because voters would love a 50 years younger Joe Biden, Amtrak Joe. And the other great nugget that came out today was at that June fundraiser, this is June of last year, where Julia Roberts and George Clooney raised tens of millions of dollars for this ticket. Joe Biden didn't even know who George Clooney was. And his little minder had to go, Mr. President, this is George. Hey, I know who it is. And it's like, no, George Clooney. Right. And they couldn't even acknowledge that. So he truly is a zombie. He is unkillable. He is doing so much damage. And the whole look forward thing is even worse, because if you don't examine your mistakes, you are going to repeat them. And if there's threat of that, voters will never trust your party.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer refusing to comment on the latest book about former President Biden's 2024 campaign. It reportedly claims that Schumer at a wedding said that not to worry about it, that Democrats had a plan B, including Nancy Pelosi, President Obama. He said in this quote, if things, quote, go south at that first debate, which, of course, we all saw was an absolute train wreck on June 27th. The book points out Schumer later denied that he made that comment, so he had a chance to respond and to straighten out the record on this on camera. Watch.
We're looking forward.
That's it?
That's it.
He is among the people that are responsible for this. The leaders of the Democratic Party, the staff of the White House. And I have to say, I find everybody now talking to these authors, get out of here. Go home. You're part of the problem. Now you tell us. So I find, the reason why the Democratic Party has less credibility today, because of this distrust.
Okay, let's bring in California Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna, a former Biden 2024 campaign surrogate. Congressman, it's always good to have you here. And I understand the inclination to say we're moving forward, we're putting this behind us. But you hear Chuck Todd there saying that there is sort of trust and credibility business that needs to be rebuilt among the party. Sir, here you are several times before the election saying that he was just fine. Watch this.
Biden seeking re-election?
Absolutely. I've seen the president twice in the last 2 weeks. I've had a conversation with him. He's completely mentally sharp. When the president is out there, he's at his best. Have him debate in the general election. I don't think Donald Trump will. I have spoken with the president. He is fully coherent. He is on top of details when I have talked to him.
Were you telling the truth back then?
I was. I have met him a few times at public events, and he was. But of course, I didn't have the full picture. I mean, I met him maybe 2 times on rope lines and at public events. And I do think it's important that, given what has come out, that we take accountability. Obviously, he should not have run. We should be clear to say that. Obviously, there should have been an open primary. And I don't think that's very difficult. Democrats should just be straight up that he should not have run. Now that we know all of the facts, there should have been an open primary. I think to move on and move forward, it's important to take accountability and be straightforward with the American people.
Do you blame him for this or his family? Like, why wasn't there some sort of intervention when clearly it was obvious that something was very wrong? It didn't just happen once or twice. It happened almost weekly.
Ultimately, the buck stops with the president. He made an incorrect decision of running, and given all the reporting that has come out. Now, look, there were those of us, including me, who were surrogates for him, campaigning for him. When we saw him on a rope line, when we had a 2-minute conversation with him at an event.
But you saw him on TV. You saw him falling down. You saw him, looking around, trying to figure out where he was supposed to go next. So you saw Barack Obama here leading him off the stage as if he didn't know where he was going. So it wasn't that you only saw him in those little instances, right?
Well, I saw him in those instances, and I saw him on television like every other American. But we had the White House saying that he was perfectly in charge, he was capable, and in the brief interactions we had on a rope line, he seemed perfectly fine. But the point is that obviously we now know that there were people who knew about his decline, that he was not in shape to run. And in retrospect, David Axelrod was right to be warning about that. And we should just be honest as a party that we made a mistake. We should have been stronger in calling for him to run.
I mean, there were a lot of documents signed, a lot of decisions made in Afghanistan, a lot of national security issues at stake during all those times.
Well, I think there are two different questions. One, whether he should have run. The other, whether he was actually doing the job and capable of doing the job. And I haven't read all the books and everything, but I think the bigger issue is, was he capable of running? I think that is pretty obvious that he should not have made the decision to run. There hasn't been reporting saying he wasn't able to make the big decisions about the job.
Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you very much. Look forward to having you back soon. A lot going on the Hill. Thank you, sir.
So now to the aftershocks still rippling concerning former President Joe Biden, his decline, and the alleged cover-up, as they call it. Now comes another claim. First Lady Jill Biden abruptly cut off the Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro after Shapiro raised concerns about the president's dismal debate performance in that month of June. Mary Catherine Ham, Fox News contributor, Kevin Walling, former Biden surrogate. Hello to both of you. If we were on Jeopardy, the category would be obvious. Or maybe we told you so, okay? So there's a new book out, yet again. Alex Thompson from Axios, Jake Tapper, CNN. It's called Original Sin. And this has been rippling around the ether, okay? This is Laura Trump with Jake Tapper in October of 2020. This went on for a while. We pulled this clip.
What we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable
you are
to watch somebody on stage
it's so amazing. It's so amazing to me
and try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
Well, when you're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I think that you were mocking his stutter. Yeah, I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline.
Yeah, I mean, it went on for a while now. I think at one point you said, I'm no doctor, I'm an observer, whatever the words was. I think I was paraphrasing here. MK, are we stating the obvious? Did you find something new this time around?
I mean, breaking. It was not a stutter. We are reaching sort of ludicrous levels of the media reporting on the media noticing something that 80% of Americans noticed in 21 or 22, Now, that was 2020 when that clip ran, but it was more than a stutter then as well. I mean, the next thing they're going to tell me is that, Trump wasn't a Russian asset, or that Hunter Biden, in fact, wasn't an international energy expert and renowned artist, and that's why he was getting paid all that money. Look, the media often comes to conclusions that the American people came to using their eyes and ears far earlier, and then congratulates themselves for doing it. I think this is a major scandal. I don't want to know when George Clooney decided, because Biden didn't recognize him, that this was the end of the road and he was shaken to his core. I want to know who was president when Biden wasn't, because there were many times when I don't think he was capable of doing the job, when he was only capable of doing the job for a few short hours a day. We have this information. I appreciate that the media is finally interested in this, largely because the American people won't forget forget that this happened and that they were lied to about it. But the smearing of people who said something different is a real problem, and people should apologize.
Okay, Kevin,
for it.
I want to bring you in. I think you've been pretty frank about this from the beginning, and you were close to the Biden White House, at least in the beginning, I guess we could argue. An excerpt from the book says, if there's no diagnosis, there's nothing to disclose. That's according to a White House medical unit consultant. On his face, that's true. What do you think about this topic now, Kevin, at this point?
Well, certainly, Bill, to your point, the White House should have taken a different tact in terms of its response. It closed ranks, right? Put the president behind closed doors, away from the press, rather than address the concerns, serious concerns of the American people. To MK's point, 2/3 of the American people thought he was too old for the job for re-election in 2024. And rather than addressing those concerns, they kind of walled him off from the media, from the American people. And then we saw the effect of that in that debate in June, one of the worst nights of my life, because I was there on Fox having to spin for that night. And the American people saw what had happened. And of course, the Biden of 2020 was a lot different than the Biden of 2024. And I wish he had been that transitional candidate that he talked about, and that transitional leader to give way to the next generation of Democrats that were waiting in the ranks.
Yeah, I like that phrase there, Kevin, having to spin. I mean, that could be the title of your next book now. So now let's move the conversation forward, because there are some who are now stepping out a little bit, who we might see in New Hampshire, we might see in Iowa. J.B. Pritzker, Pete Buttigieg. Roll this.
I think the one thing that I would say is that certainly either he needed to be the Democratic nominee, as he promised he would be, or he needed to drop out before the Democratic primaries.
Would the party have been better off if he had just not run for re-election?
Maybe. And, right now, with the benefit of hindsight, I think most people would agree that that's the case.
Okay, there you go. Mayor Pete's got a beard. Andy's in Iowa. MK, I don't know. I mean, has the story run its course?
I mean, look, in the political world, we're all happy to talk about 2028 already, and he's grown his beard to do so. Look, I think the problem for both, for anybody who's in the running for 2028 for Democrats is, one, you do have to distance yourself from Biden and from the cover-up of his health, and they should be held to account for the things they said at the time and the access they had to them and what they knew. And then you also have to make an argument that you're good at your job that you've done, right? J.B. Pritzker is overseeing Illinois, which has deep fiscal problems, deep educational problems, deep quality of life problems. Pete Buttigieg, when he got his job at Department of Transportation, I don't deny that he's a very good talker. I think he's engaging. I think he seems like he's thought about policy. But then he had a chance to enact policy at Department of Transportation, and he often just wasn't at the switch. And then now he's Monday morning quarterbacking anyone who comes after him. And so I think you have to prove, if you're Newsom or if you're him or if you're Pritzker, that you did a job well while you were doing the job, I think, for Democratic voters.
Kevin, the dismount comes when?
Well, listen, I think more importantly is how these folks are navigating Trump 2.0, especially these governors, right? You have a different tact with J.B. Pritzker, fire and brimstone, taking the fight to Donald Trump. And you have Gretchen Whitmer with that binder moment in the Oval Office, trying to navigate working with the Trump administration, right? Bringing jobs and investments back to Michigan. So I think, obviously to MK's point, navigating, and responding to, the Biden, relationship is one thing. I think more importantly is what you're doing for your state, whether you're a governor or in Congress, and how you're navigating Trump 2.0 is really what's going to resonate with Democratic-based supporters.
Okay, amen to that. Kevin, MK, thanks. Love you guys together. Come on back,
Bill.
okay? Appreciate your time today.
Have a good one.
Okay, you too.
Peter Schweitzer, so much going on. This has been an extraordinary trip, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are vectors moving in all sorts of directions that implicate a lot of things. And I think it indicates that, Trump is a guy who is transactional. He's a businessman, which I think is very, very good. But we also have to be cautious when you're dealing with foreign actors like China. Their interest is not always in just securing a deal that's good for both sides.
Also, people look at what's happening in Syria. And this guy was former al-Nusra, former al-Qaeda, runs Syria. But it's been presented to him that it would be in our interest to make sure Iran stays out and that Russia gets out and that China doesn't get in, because China does not care who you are if they could do business with you. So this was a tactical move.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And look, I think the role here of the Saudis is crucially important. We know that Donald Trump has a good working relationship with the Saudis. This is a Saudi government that really, under MBS's leadership, has moved more to the pro-Western orbit, certainly less hostile to Israel. And so I think if they are whispering in Trump's ear, look, we have relationships with the Syrian leadership, we think that we can get them to move in a less anti-Western posture. Let's try to work that. So I think Trump is really leaning on the Saudis here, and we'll have to see if their assessment is accurate. But I think every once in a while in these kinds of situations, especially when a new actor emerges, you have to give them an opportunity. The Iranians are different, Brian, as you and I know. That same regime has been in power since 1979, same kind of leadership. In the case of Syria, it's a new opportunity. So let's see if they're willing to become more pro-Western in their orientation.
Peter, you must be driving you crazy as people come up with revelations about the Bidens are not the great American family we thought. You wrote the book, Blood Money. You talked about how corrupt they were. And now we're focusing on a fourth book now that talks about their incompetence while in office. And one was written unbelievably by Jake Tapper, who fought against people that brought up the fact that he wasn't making sense, can't walk, can't talk, and is virtually invisible in the office. What are your thoughts right now as now all of a sudden people are being honest about what kind of president he was?
Yeah, no, I think it's particularly outrageous when you have people like Jake Tapper doing this, because you're right. I mean, there's this thing, Jake, called the internet, where we can actually go and look at previous interviews you did on this topic. And in the spring of 2024, he was pushing back on arguments that, that Joe Biden was not mentally there. I would also say, though, the other part of the story that they're neglecting is there were a lot of reports in early 2024 that one of the reasons Joe Biden was running for re-election was nobody in the White House had confidence in Kamala Harris. And that's proven to be true as well. So the revisionism is astounding as it relates to Joe Biden. But let's also remember why the Biden team felt the need to run for re-election in 2024. And that's because they had no confidence whatsoever in Kamala Harris. And that proved to be pretty accurate as well.
But you know what? The thing is, the whole Russia investigation, the years that they were convinced, they tried to convince America that Donald Trump got elected because Russia put him there and he was a Russian stooge. Total fallacy, waste of multi-million dollars, and his own sons and were being scrutinized. His business was destroyed. His son-in-law was almost put in jail for actually doing nothing wrong. His national security advisor was fired for something. In retrospect, he did nothing wrong. So having said all that, the president's making sure that doesn't happen to him this time. But one person behind it was Joe Biden. You know, he was there every step of the way about this corruption that even put him back into office. And when he gets back into office, he spends a lot of his time, subtly, I think it's going to be revealed, making sure that Donald Trump has a lot of legal problems. When you look at the Joe Biden that they described today behind the scenes, they have 200 sources. You know what that's like. All unnamed. That talks about various times in which Joe Biden has failed to recognize his own staff.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's astounding, but honestly, it's not that astounding, Brian. I mean, you've done a lot of reporting on this. Other people observed the same thing in the spring where he sort of wandered around endlessly. So, I mean, this sort of shocking revelation is really not that shocking unless you're in the bubble that is in the D.C. media. And I think that this administration, the Biden administration, is really going to become kind of a test case for a lot of things. You mentioned one of them, which was the lawfare, this aggressive desire to go after your political opponents, especially a guy, Donald Trump, who was presumably going to be running against you again in 2024. Let's remember, even the New York Times reported in early 2021 that Joe Biden was frustrated with his own attorney general that he was not aggressively enough pursuing legal action against Donald Trump. That is really really, as far as I'm concerned, unprecedented in American history. So you have that layer of it. Then you have the layer of it where Joe Biden's not there, that really it's his staff running things. Certainly haven't had that since Woodrow Wilson had a stroke in office and his wife, Edith, was really running the affairs of the country. So this was a train wreck of his administration, not just in terms of policy, but in terms of actual conduct towards his political rivals and to lying to the American people. So it needs to be scrutinized, and the Democrats need to do a lot of soul searching, Brian. You and I have seen a lot of so-called Trump derangement syndrome, people kind of hysterically doing things on the street. This is Trump derangement syndrome on both of those areas in the halls of the Oval Office itself. And I think Democrats need to do a serious reevaluation of the calculus that they're even making.
His best security was Kamala Harris because she was so incompetent. Remember, about 6 months before Joe Biden's debate against Trump and when he all fell apart, they were asking people like Jamie Raskin, do you think that Kamala Harris should be on the ticket? I don't know. It's not my choice. Asking Nancy Pelosi, well, it's up to Joe. Really? Do you really think that people, a Republican, would have trouble saying J.D. Vance should run with Trump or Al Gore should run with Bill Clinton? They were telling you, get her off the ticket so we could have a future. But what about this? Mark, I thought about you last week because Mark Halperin came out and did some reporting. And he said part of the reason why Joe Biden's coming back to do The View, the BBC, and get a memoir going, because the money has dried up. Biden Inc. has no more ink, and he has nothing to do, and he can't earn money. Nobody wants his speeches. Nobody wants his appearances. Nobody wants him on the campaign trail. And there's a lot of grandchildren and children who are on the Joe Biden dole. How true do you think that is?
No, I think it's dead on. I mean, look, Joe Biden has been selling access to Joe Biden pretty much his entire electoral career. Let's remember, before he was vice president to Barack Obama, Hunter Biden was what? He was a lobbyist for people in Delaware. People in Delaware were hiring Hunter Biden. It's a very small state. They were hiring Hunter Biden so they could actually access his dad, who happened to be the senator for their state. So this has been the mode of operation even before the Ukraine and the China deals. I think one of the areas we should be watching, Brian, is I still do believe that during that period, after that disastrous debate in 2024, when Joe Biden, people calling for him to get out, and there was about a 4 to 6 week period before he actually dropped out, where Hunter Biden moved into the White House, lived with Joe. I am absolutely firmly convinced that they negotiated deals with Democrat donors to get him to leave. That, in other words, he said, I'm going to leave only if you take care of my family. So I think they certainly have more financial needs, but I do believe that there were probably deals struck with Democrat donors. They're not going to have to disclose those. They're not going to have to be made public. And then, of course, the latest issue out there is there are supposedly negotiations going on with Jill Biden's memoir. And Jill Biden, of course, wants to write a kind of fluffy memoir that nobody's going to buy. Publishers want her to publish parts of her diary, particularly those areas that talk about the decline of her husband. And the question's going to become whether that money is so attractive that she's essentially going to throw her husband under the bus to get the big payday from publishers.
I mean, look, she kept throwing him out there. He couldn't walk. He couldn't talk. He couldn't enter a stage. What family member would ever do that? They cared about their spouse or their kid or their uncle or their in-law. Nobody would do that unless you were so consumed by power that you couldn't help yourself, which seems to be the case. Or you just don't care about that person in particular and you love being first lady while you make all the calls almost as if you're president. I want some of these cabinet members to stand up and talk about how Joe Biden did nothing at his 8 cabinet meetings over 4 years and how many times they took calls from Jill Biden. I'm sure that'll happen. But I got to ask you, do you know that he confused Becerra and Mayorkas? Do you know that he couldn't recognize Jake Sullivan? Do you know that at George Clooney's fundraiser that he threw for him, he didn't recognize the most recognizable actor in America when introduced to him? I mean, this is unbelievable. What are other countries thinking about us that they were able to pull this off?
Well, and let's remember, you're right, Brian, during the same time he couldn't recognize George Clooney or he couldn't recognize his longtime aide, Jake Sullivan, he was on the phone talking to foreign leaders. I mean, he was talking to Putin. He was talking to Xi. He was talking to Zelensky. And God forbid if the transcripts of those are released, what did he say or what didn't he say? I think there certainly was a lot of confusion by this administration on policy towards China, towards Russia and Ukraine. Part of that was probably the traditional factions you have in any administration. But I would not be surprised if it was muddled and it was confused because Joe Biden was on the phone saying things to these leaders or saying things to diplomats visiting him in the White House that made no sense or were completely inconsistent with what stated policy was.
You just wonder when people are going to be honest with you if you catch them lying and they don't admit it. So Chuck Schumer was confronted on CNN, cut 36.
You were in there, you saw him up close and personal. Did you really not have any idea that he was not fit to serve a second term?
Casey, we're looking forward. We have the largest Medicaid cut in front of us. We have the whole federal
you're
government
facing all
at
of this
risk.
because you lost a presidential election. And is that not Joe Biden's responsibility for deciding to run again?
We're looking forward.
That's it?
That's it.
It's not okay. Evidently in the book they say Chuck Schumer had a plan B. That means you lied to the American people. You were willing to lie again. If he was leading in the polls, he would have stayed there as a zombie, and he would have been perfectly happy to do it. So now you want us to believe you that Medicaid's being cut, big lies, that Donald Trump is a brutal dictator or a Nazi. Now you're going to say all those things and you expect to have any credibility at all?
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem that the Democrats face, which is a credibility issue. And we know in general, politicians in Washington, D.C. are not that popular in the country. Just look at the polls. I think the congressional approval rating is like 18%. But the Democrats have made it worse because not only do you have the people in the middle and certainly the people that are part of the Trump coalition not trusting them, even now their own base. I mean, part of the reason you're seeing, frankly, this cannibalism of AOC and Bernie Sanders, attacking the oligarchy, but also attacking other Democrats, the same reason you see David Hogg, this sort of young kid who became vice chairman of the Democratic Party, saying, I'm going to primary other Democrats. Why do you see that cannibalism? Because a lot of the base of the Democratic Party does not trust this leadership. And part of this, let's remember, is generational, Brian. I mean, yes, Joe Biden, 80 years old, but guys, in the Senate and the House that are the leadership, they're not far behind him. And a lot of these young bucks in the Democratic Party don't like them, not just because of their age and because of their policies, but also because they don't trust them because they've been lied to too many times.
They just should, and Peter, they should just had normal primaries and let the best person win. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton was an honest election. The other person shocked Hillary Clinton. But since that time, they made sure Hillary Clinton won. They made sure Joe Biden won. They made sure nobody ran against Joe Biden. Just let the votes happen. David Hogg wins a vote, and they're saying he's too white. He's not DEI enough. So they're going to toss him out again. It's crazy. Peter, thanks so much. I can't wait for your next book.
Members of Congress slamming their bodies into our law enforcement officers, shoving them, screaming profanities in their faces, striking them with their fists, and otherwise assaulting law enforcement. The behavior was lawlessness, and it was beneath this body.
That's ongoing now. The DHS secretary there and the acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement both testifying before House lawmakers today. Kristi Noem and Todd Lyons are facing contentious questions from the Democratic lawmakers in the room, and the tensions are building over all about the clash between ICE agents and Democratic lawmakers in Newark, New Jersey last week. So that's a flashpoint today. Republican Congressman Buddy Carter has introduced a new resolution, and it would remove those 3 House Democrats from their committee posts over that behavior that you see on the screen right there. Wait, the lady in the lawmaker in the red jacket, she eventually body checks him and then has her hand above his shoulders. Anyway, Democrat lawmakers in both chambers are accusing the administration of obstructing oversight in that.
The right of peaceful protest is sacrosanct in America. The Trump administration and often its Justice Department doesn't seem to believe in it.
What happens if they were to go and arrest these members, or if they would try to sanction them here in the House of Representatives?
They'll find out.
What would you do? I mean, what record?
It's a red line. It's very clear.
It's a red line to go after people who were body checking law enforcement or ICE agents. Law enforcement was there, too. A spokesperson for the National Republican Congressional Committee responded this way. Radical Democrats are now openly threatening law enforcement just to stand behind their criminal illegal immigrant MS-13 buddies. Every single American is watching very closely and won't forget this for a second, end quote. Assistant DHS Secretary Tricia McLaughlin.
The fact that it was these 3 members of Congress who trespassed, broke the law, and stormed that ICE detention facility. They put law enforcement at risk, they put our detainees at risk, and they put our staff at risk. The fact that they put hands, they body slammed, body rammed, push, shove, whatever you want to call it, it was assault on our ICE agents, and it's unacceptable.
In focus now, Republican Senator Katie Britt from the great state of Alabama. She sits on Judiciary, Appropriations, and Rules Committees. Great to have you in focus today. Look, this was more than just a photo op for Democrats. They're willing to get physical out there, not in the defense of American citizens, but those behind bars, 75% of whom are have committed felonies inside that detention facility. Your reaction?
It's absolutely despicable, and Americans deserve better. I think Democrats are making it clear. They have the backs of criminal, illegal aliens, and Republicans have the backs of the American people. I mean, when you see this level of aggression, I wish we would have seen this passion and fortitude when it came to the lives lost from these criminal illegal aliens. What about their victims, Harris? I mean, you think about Rachel Marin. We heard nothing from Democrats. Those lawmakers serving in that space, not taking time with her mother or her children after she was raped and brutally murdered. You see these members storming this facility, assaulting ICE officers. It is absolutely reprehensible, and America deserves better.
So when you hear the leader of the Democrats in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, say if they try to arrest those 3 House members that we see in the video here, they'll just have to find out what happens. That sounds like a threat. What do you think he's threatening?
Look, Harris, I'm pretty sure that Hakeem Jeffries, let's rewind, no one is above the law. No one is above the law. Hearing Senator Schumer, this is yet another Schumer show. Look, their words mean nothing. We saw them take up for Biden, saying that he was fine. You just covered it on your show. That was absolutely false, and they knew it. They also know that these members were way out of bounds. Not only were they past the threshold of which they should be, but assaulting and pushing an ICE officer, there are consequences for that. The lawlessness is over, and we are sick of these Democrats finding ways to try to take up for people who are here illegally, forging these paths instead of the people that they actually serve. Look, on November 5th, Harris, America spoke loud and clear. They said, we want secure borders, we want secure streets, we want our children to be safe. That is what we are putting forth as the American people, to the American people. That's what President Trump's vision is. That is what DHS is executing on. That's what we're working on here. I was proud to pass the Lake and Riley Act and to help these criminal illegal aliens, help our ICE officers get these criminal illegal aliens off of our streets.
Look, I want to talk more about the people that you just mentioned who are inside this facility. Let's not forget who they are. Authorities say there are known MS-13 gang members, an illegal immigrant wanted for murder, and a legal immigrant arrested for assault with a deadly weapon. And I said 75% of them in that facility have committed felonies. More from Secretary Noem's opening statement now.
I'd like to remind Americans and everyone in this body who is detained in this detention facility are murderers, rapists, known terrorists, MS-13 gang members, drug traffickers, and other heinous actors. I hope that those members of Congress will so passionately protest on behalf of the American victims that they were elected to represent, and not just violent criminals who are in this country illegally.
Look, you were just making that very point. I wanted to show the audience that, we're in lockstep among the Republicans on this as a nation. Why aren't we in lockstep on the other side of the aisle? Quick thought on that, and we'll move forward.
They're out of touch with the American people. They have let the liberal wing of their party now controls it. They care more about this than they do the people they serve, and it's a sad day for America, and I hope they wake up before it's too late, because what they're doing is reprehensible and certainly unsustainable for our nation overall.
A federal grand jury has indicted that Milwaukee County judge, and this was making huge headlines in recent days. FBI agents arrested that judge for allegedly helping a man sneak out and escape immigration authorities. Circuit Court Judge Hannah Dugan faces 2 charges of carrying a maximum penalty of 6 years in prison and a $350,000 fine. Prosecutors say Judge Dugan helped an illegal immigrant and his lawyer out of her courtroom through a back jury door last month after learning that ICE agents were in the courthouse there to arrest him. This is egregious. Your reaction to maybe moving forward now with this?
You know, this is an example of rules for thee and not for me. And this is what the American people are sick of. 2 tiers of justice, people taking their liberal ideology to the next level, thinking that laws don't apply to them, thinking they know better than the rule of law. And look, there are consequences for this, and we're going to see that play out, and that's exactly what should happen.
Senator Katie Britt, a pleasure to have you in focus today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.